Hi, I'm Emily from Emily Bakes Cakes, and today I'm going to make a recipe that people really like. I really love it so much, but it's not a cake. It is chili verde, and my recipe kind of comes from Rick Bayless filling that he made for tamales, but I just kind of kept it more liquidy, and so then that made it into a chili verde. And it's really easy to make, and people when they taste it, they're always surprised when I say, oh, it's so easy. And the part that takes the longest is cooking the meat. And so I'll tell you, the easiest meat that I found to use is this pork sirloin tip roast, and you can buy a 4-pack of them at Costco. And usually what I do is I'll buy the 4-pack and I'll cook 2 roasts and then put the other 2 roasts in the freezer. And I mean, it's a cheap piece of meat, but what I really like about it is that, as you can see, there's not very much fat and there's not a lot of like what I refer to as gross things in it. So when you're shredding it, like, I don't spend a lot of time having to pick through it. And so because I used to use pork shoulder or even boneless country style pork ribs, but that is much fattier and it had a lot more like things that I would pick out, things that reminded me it was meat. So, and what I will tell you as well is, if I am feeling lazy and I don't want to make chili verde, then I just use this as taco meat. And 2 roasts is enough to fill about 25 taco shells, is what I found. You know, those Tortilla Land take and bake taco shells, tortilla shells. And so it makes about 25. And then my family has dinner for 2 nights. So I'll just show you kind of what I'm doing today. I'm cooking 3 roasts. And what I do is I just put it in the crock pot. It cooks a lot faster in the oven. And so if you're cooking it in the oven at like 325, it only takes about 2.5 to 3 hours. And honestly, you just check it. And whenever it's tender enough, then that's when you would pull it out. And I stick a fork in it, and when it seems like it's easy to shred, then that's what I do. So you just open this up, and I hate the meat juice. Everything gets Clorox wiped afterwards. So I'll put this in here. They're frozen, and so it's not going to lay down exactly yet, but let me hurry and wash my hands. So, like I said, this is a nice cheap piece of meat that has a good flavor, that's not too porky. This right here, this garlic salt, is one of my very favorites, and if I'm doing just plain taco meat, and I used to just only put this on it, but then I started adding chili powder, and it all is just to taste, right? It's all just how you like it. You can get kind of snobby here and be like, oh, there's better chili powders, but you know, I think it's fine. It tastes good. And then salt. You always want to salt your raw meat. Okay, and then pepper, because I think it adds a good spice. So that's what we do. And you can flip it over so that you get both sides seasoned, but I think there's enough seasoning there. And then what I usually do is 1 onion per roast. Except for since there's 3 roasts in here, I did have 3 onions, but then I thought, when I was looking at it, I thought, oh, that's a little much. So this is just 2 onions. And you don't really need to put water in with it, but I like to. Here's what I'll tell you, is as it's cooking, there will be tons of juices that come out of it, and the part that's in the liquid becomes the most soft. And so near the end of the cooking time, you're going to want to rotate your roasts so that all of it spends some time in the braising liquid so that it will become soft. So I'm just going to turn this on high and let it cook for probably until, let's see, for probably about 6 to 8 hours, and I just keep checking until it's soft. Okay, so I put the tin foil on because it was too full with it frozen, but now I can take it off. But you can see, this is how it looks, and there's quite a bit of juice inside there. I think I'm going to add a little bit more just because This one is so out of the water, but I'm going to put the lid back on. Just keep going. It's about halfway. Well, it's been about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So anyway, we'll check back later. So we put it in at about 10:30 this morning, and it is almost 7 o'clock tonight. And that's normally I would have taken it out earlier, but I was just gone. So here you can look and see how it looks, and you can see how much liquid. So I only put in about 2 of this cup, filled to about like right there. And so you can see tons of liquid comes out of it. And so what I like to do is just stick my fork in to see how tender it is, and you can see it just shreds really, really easily. So I'm just going to turn it off, and let's see, there we go. And just let it kind of sit in the juice and kind of cool off a little bit. Oh wow, look, this one is super tender. It shreds really easily. So I usually get 2 forks to shred. My brother has these awesome claws that he uses to shred it, and that works really well too. One thing that I do is, because it does shred in these super long things like this, and obviously the dog would like some, she's not going to get any, is my shears, my Cutco shears, and I just go and I cut it and snip it so that it doesn't have such long strips of meat. So I'll come back and we'll show you what it looks like when we shred it. So I'm going to show you how I just cut up the meat. So I found that this is super easy. I mean, you can see how soft it is and how much liquid came out from just cooking the meat. But I found that this is the easiest way to kind of start the shredding process. The one on the top needed to have probably been moved down to the liquid, but I mean, it still is pretty tender, as you can see. This makes my hand very tired though, but you can always kind of just break it apart, shred it up. And we want to leave that juice in there because a lot of it absorbs in with the meat. And then also you use it to flavor the chili verde. So, and you can see there's not like a lot of gross stringy fat or anything like that. It has a really good flavor and is really nice and salty. So I'll just keep doing this until it's all shredded, and then I'll come back and we'll make the chili verde sauce. Okay, so you can see that I think it's pretty well shredded. I used a scissors, and I mean, you can see how the juice is not quite as high as it was before. So, but it's all nice and juicy and mixed well, and I just leave the onions in there with it too. They add a nice flavor. Okay, so now we're going to make the sauce, the chili verde. I'm going to move this out of the way. Now, I used canned tomatillos. I have used fresh tomatillos before, and that is fine too. I just don't like to have to, you peel the papery off, the papery covering off, and then you wash the stickiness off. And I have roasted them in the oven, you know, cut them in half, roasted them, and then ground them up and used them. I have just put them in the blender raw and used them, and then I just cook my the sauce for longer. And I found that it all pretty much evens out at the end because you get a nice tomatillo flavor no matter what. And so for this amount, I thought I had more cans in the basement, and that's what I will say is it can be tricky to find them sometimes. They're not at all grocery stores. Like Target doesn't have it, but I did find it at Dan's. And so I thought I had more in my basement than I did, but I have these 3 cans, and normally like the proportions would be probably 2 cans for 2 roasts, and it depends on how liquidy you want your chili verde to be ultimately. I also have 1 jalapeno left over from a thing I made from making chili verde just barely, and so I'm just cutting out the inside seeds. And this obviously has to be to your taste. If you like it more spicy, then obviously add in more chilies. I just usually add in probably 1 can. I'm gonna see how much sauce this makes, and then if I think that I need more of these chilies, then I'll add in more. But I mean, obviously this is not, like if you want to buy some Anaheims or Pasillos or any of those and then roast them or even just grind them up raw, that's what I've done too, and they add a nice flavor. So all I'm gonna do is dump those in there. I drained the water out. Well, not as well as I probably should have on that, but I think, and then you just pulse it. You want it to be really pretty smooth so that the seeds are the only thing. Okay. Now, all right, I have that. Now over in my pot, I forgot to turn it on, so we'll probably come back after this is heated up. But I have 2 to 3 tablespoons of oil that I have in here, just olive oil or vegetable oil, any type of oil that you want. Before we add our tomatillo sauce, we're going to put in probably 2 tablespoons of garlic. And here is another thing too, is I've used regular garlic, you know, chopped it up, minced it up, or had a garlic press. And I know that there are people that probably can tell the taste difference, but I personally can't, since this is just a minor flavor note within the chili verde. And so for me, the flavors that I really like are the tomatillo with the lime and the cilantro and the pork flavor, the rich meaty flavor that's in there. And so if I can taste those flavor notes, then I'm really happy to taste those. And also I have chili pepper or crushed red pepper that will spice it up a lot if you just even put in like 1 or 2 shakes of it. And so if you like it more spicy, definitely, you know, make it more spicy. So we'll come back in a minute when the oil is heated up and we'll put the garlic in and let it saute for a minute. Okay, so our oil is heated up and I just put in, and watch it splatter. Okay. I'm just gonna have that kind of, now when you put the tomatillos in, the blended up tomatillos, you also are gonna have that same splattery thing happen. And so just be aware of that. Also, since it is thicker, it will burn to the bottom. And it does that ploppy thing that thicker things do, where it plops up and it splatters. So you just kind of want to keep an eye on it and stir it. So let's go. I'm going to blender my last can of those and add in my chilies. Let's see. I think that looks like enough. I don't think I'll open up the other can. Just blendering it. Let's see, does it look fairly smooth? Okay, that's what it looks like. Okay, so now we'll just come over here and we'll put this in the pot. Okay. And I don't know if this will, like I said, it depends on how juicy you want your chili verde to be with how much meat you decide to add in. Because as you saw, it was pretty juicy meat, and so there's a lot of juice that we're going to add in to this after. So we just kind of let this simmer for about 10 to 20 minutes. And you would let it simmer for longer, probably about 20 to 30 minutes if you had put fresh or raw tomatillos in there. But if you had roasted them, you wouldn't need to cook them for as long. So anyway, so we'll just let this kind of simmer and we'll come back when we add the meat.
Okay, so you can see it's bubbling and it will stick to the bottom, so I'm using my flat tipped wooden spoon. You just want to make sure you stir it every once in a while, otherwise it will stick. And like I said, it does get splattery, so you probably want to have it on low heat. Okay, so our meat is perfectly seasoned, but we haven't added any seasonings to this yet. And I add the same seasonings to this as I did to our meat. So I've got some chili powder, and it's all very much extremely to taste. Like I add in probably a couple teaspoons of that, and then cumin. My husband really likes cumin, so we'll probably do a couple more teaspoons of that as well. And I add in a couple of shakes of the red pepper flakes, and then, splattery. Just kind of mix that in. And I haven't added any salt yet. And I would add probably at least 2 teaspoons of salt to it, or maybe just 1, and then taste it. See how salty you like it, because obviously you can always add more salt. You can't take salt out again. Okay, I think that looks like it's a good ratio of sauce to meat. And you can see I have some juice down in there, and I think I'm going to pour some of that in with my chili burger. I decided I wanted a little bit more cilantro and a little bit more chili pepper, so so it's simmered, and honestly, if you don't have time to let it just simmer, then that is totally fine too. It tastes just great. So I actually ended up adding in all of the meat and all of the juice. So this is 3 roasts. And now to finish it off, what we do is I have 2 limes that I've cut up, and I'm just going to add in the juice of these 2 limes and see how it tastes. See if I need to add a 3rd with how many roasts I put in there. And I've heard that if you add the lime juice and it gets cooked, see, this is why I thought the lemon one would work so well, back on my lemon cream. But, because it just comes out so nice and easy. Okay, and you add in the cilantro too. And I just do a really rough chop of 1 bunch for a pot. So, I mean, the proportions are fairly loose based on what you have. Like if you only had 1 can of tomatillos, then you could just put in less meat. Okay, let's see. I don't think it needs to be that, because it all kind of shrinks down as you put it in the heat. That just gives it a nice flavor and brightness. And I really like cilantro, and I know a couple of my kids don't like cilantro, but anyway. So you just mix that all in. And so now is the time where you taste it and you try and decide, do I want to add more cumin? Do I want to add more chili powder? Do I want to add more spice to it? And you can add, now obviously remember that if you're going to be putting it on something more salty, like a tortilla chip, account for that, so that you might not want to add as much salt to the meat, or if you're putting it with cheese when you're making burritos. Also, I've put this in a crock pot and kept it warm for several hours before we were going to eat it. So let's see, I think I'll have a little bit of a taste now. It's really good, but I think it needs 1 more lime, because I really like lime. And so I'll add some more lime juice. I think it just makes it nice and fresh tasting. And like I said, I probably will put this in quart bags and freeze it. Okay. So that is a lot of meat. And that is a lot of chili verde. So All right, let me taste it, see if I need to add a little bit more salt maybe. Actually, I think it needs more lime. So let me grab, because I love the lime. So, and honestly, it shouldn't be a surprise, right? For this much, to have that lime flavor. And it's not spicy at all in its current form with how much I've put in. So, obviously, if that's something that really matters to you, then go for the more spicy and do some more jalapenos or leave the seeds in. Let's see. So, see, I've added in 5 limes for 3 roasts. Well, more like 2.5 roasts. Okay. There. I think that would be good. Because I like to leave the spice up to each individual person so that they can put as much spice as they want. Let's see. And also because I'm making for a bunch of children, so. Okay, well, I think that is going to be good. And that's right. That's really good now. So, all right, well, I hope you make the chili verde. It's super simple.